This is a second video tutorial for the Sagebrush blouse from Wearing History. This is a 1930s blouse. In this tutorial, we'll go over how to do both of the sleeves, the short and long sleeves. This is the short sleeve. You also have a cuff, which is a facing. So first thing to do is match those notches, put it right sides together. You're also going to turn under the top edge 3/8 of an inch, which is the seam allowance for this pattern. So press that, then align those right sides together and stitch across using your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. After that's done, it looks like this. You can press your seam allowance up. Then you are going to match the side seams together. So match those notches, match the seam line, and match the other notches, and then stitch that with your seam allowance. After this is stitched, you're going to open that and press this seam open. Now you're going to turn up the facing, and you're going to pin that all the way around, and then you're going to stitch this into place. After it's stitched, with its right side out, you will turn up the cuff and hide that stitch line, but you can wait until you're done for that. Now open up the sleeve like this, and you can see your sleeve cap. Run two edges of gathering stitches, so it looked like this, between the two notches. And then the double notches on this are marking the front armhole. This was before notches were standardized for patterns. So in this particular pattern, double notches means front armhole. It's really important to mark your notches for sleeves, so please do not skip marking your notches and your dots. It's really important for how things align. It'll make setting your sleeve a lot easier. After your notches are matched, you're going to match the underarm seam and pin this together. Then you're going to match the single notches at the back of the blouse. If for some reason they don't match perfectly, which mine did, but if yours don't, just make sure you ease it together correctly and make sure that the double notches go towards the front and the single notch goes towards the back. Otherwise your sleeve will not hang correctly. Then ease it all the way across the underarm, making sure it's nice and smooth, and add your pins to hold that to place. Now I'm going to take off these pins that were holding the center fronts together, and I'm going to turn it like this, so I'm working on the inside of the blouse now. I'm going to match that dot, which should be on your pattern piece. I also made a little snip there. I'm going to match that to the shoulder seam of the blouse. And then I'm going to pin that to place. Now you need to ease across the top of the sleeve cap, so that's what the gathering stitches were for, and they will just control the fullness and help you to get a nice smooth line. There shouldn't be any puckers or gathers in this sleeve, so just make sure to go slowly. Depending on the size, there may be less or more to ease in. I had relatively little to ease in for mine, which is the size 38-inch bust of this pattern. The original size was a 32-inch bust, in case you're curious, but it is marked on your pattern what the base size was, because back then, only one size came per envelope. This one has multiple sizes in one envelope. Now this is where it gets handy to have two rows of stitches. I'm going to grab one thread and ease that across so that it has the same amount of gathers and it controls the fullness. So just ease that all the way across so it's even, no tucks and no puckers. Now you're going to stitch with 3/8 of an inch all the way around. When it's done, it looks like that. Nice and smooth with no tucks. Now we're going to do the long sleeve. So for this one, you have a slit that you need to finish with a placket, and you have some gathering, and you have some darts to do. You also have a cuff, which has a very unusual shape. You've got big circles that show you where to stop your stitching, and you've got small circles which were added for approximate button and buttonhole placement. The original did not have any button and buttonhole placement for any of the blouse, so these were added for you as well as the ones on the front. I've cut my placket 1.5 inches wide. I also have marked my seam allowance as 1/4 inch on this piece. So I'm showing you that everything's marked and my darts are now sewn and pressed downward. Now I'm going to finish that opening. This is a continuous lap placket, which is kind of like an extension. You just cut it from a scrap of your fabric. No pattern piece was originally included for this. It was pretty standard vintage knowledge. So mine is 1.5 inches wide, and I have drawn my seam line on of 1/4 inch. I find that drawing it on just really helps you to align it. So start at 1/4 inch at the bottom and then ease it to just almost nothing at the top of that line where it's cut. So it should be 1/4 inch in on the placket and then almost nothing on the blouse where the slit is. Then you turn it around and you taper it back down. So this is what it looks like on the continuous placket side. You can see my pin there, that's marking the end of the snip. So I know which one it is. Like that. And the back side, you can see how it tapers down to almost nothing, and then it goes out to 1/4 inch again. You're going to stitch that as I've done here. If you need to, you can reinforce the top. You can see I needed to redo a little bit of my stitching. Then you're going to lap this over the top after turning in the 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to match the folded edge of the placket to the stitch line, and that's going to encase all the raw edges. Then stitch this to place by hand or by machine. And you can see from the other side when I'm done that it will look really nice and neat. Now you're going to gather between the 2 crosses that are marked on your pattern piece. Do 2 double rows just like you did on the sleeve cap. You're also going to do your underarm seams, so put those right sides together, matching notches, and use 3/8 of an inch, then press this open. Now you're going to prep your cuff, so you can see that the stitch line goes from those large circles marked by snip on that piece all the way around, and you're going to pivot at the edge so that you get a nice crisp finish. This is it with the seam allowance drawn on because I figured that was easier. I then clipped it down to 1/8 of an inch, I clipped my curves, and I turned it right side out, and I pressed it with the clipped seam allowance facing up like that where the notch is at the center. Now I'm going to put it on the sleeve. So take that extension and turn it both sides to the inside of the sleeve like that. Now you're going to take one edge of the cuff as shown here and match that to the edge of the sleeve. You're going to match those notches together from the cuff and for the sleeve. And you're going to match the other edge, making sure the extension is turned in to the other end of the seam line, like this. Like I said, just one side of the sleeve, cuff, right sides together. Now you're going to ease it across, making sure it aligns very flush. No puckers, no tucks. And then you're going to pull those double threads to make sure that it fits correctly and ease those gathers in. I did find that one side had more gathers than the other. The other had almost none, so don't be surprised if that happens to you too. That's just the period pattern and how it was. So ease this all the way across again until you're at the edge of the gathering. Then use those threads, grab the tails, and pull it to fit. Then stitch it with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just on that side, making sure to leave the underside of the cuff free. After it's done, it looks like this. Press it up towards the cuff, turn under the 3/8 seam allowance on the cuff facing, and then you're going to lap the folded edge of the cuff right up to the stitch line that you just did. I find it easier to tuck in the ends first to make sure that it's covering that stitch line. And next you're going to match those 2 notches together, which you'll see right here. Match those together, pin that to place, and then ease it across to make sure it fits nice and flush. Now this did not originally call for interfacing, but if you did want interfacing on your cuffs, you would have done this first before assembling it. Now you're going to stitch that to place either by machine or by hand all the way across. When I'm finished, it looks like this. You've got these 2 little extensions that stick out. It's kind of like an exaggerated French cuff. However, you're not going to be using cuff links for this. You're going to be doing a button and buttonhole. Oh, if you wanted to, you could do French cuffs, just do 2 buttonholes instead. So the way it works is the back of the sleeve should have the button on it, like this. On the inside, it's the inside because you want those 2 little wing-a-ding things to go out the same direction. And then on the front, you're going to put your buttonhole like that. So your buttonhole's there. Then on the back of the sleeve where the darts are, that's where you want your button on the inside of the cuff. and then those two little winglings make kind of like a wingling sandwich. I don't know how to explain that. So there's my double darts, and there's the front of the sleeve with the buttonhole. Now you're going to run your 2 gathering stitches around the top of the cuff, and then you're going to pin that to place just like you did with a short sleeve. And you're going to stitch it around like this, all pinned in and eased just like the short sleeve version. And then stitched by machine, and then it's set in. So there's one with the long sleeve that you can see, buttonhole on front sleeve, button on back sleeve, like that. And then the short sleeve I did on the other side, so I could test both on the same mock-up, which I found beneficial because then I can try both versions on at the same time. You can find the pattern Wearing History on Etsy, also wearinghistorypatterns.com. Thank you very much for watching.